Yes. So this morning I thought I'd share just a short little Devar Torah that I learned many, many years ago from one of my teachers, Reuven Hammer, who lives in Israel. And so he pointed out, as I mentioned when we were reading the Torah, that it opens with a passage we didn't read because we're on the triennial cycle, but the famous passage about sending the spies out to look at the land. So the people, it's a reasonable request. The people are thinking, we're going to go conquer this land. We don't know what it's like. We don't know what the terrain is like. We don't know how fortified the cities are, what kind of weapons they have. We don't know how powerful they are. Let's, check out the territory before we try and go in and take over the place. So they take one person from each tribe, and they send them out to tour out the land. And these 12 people come back with this report, and they say, Moses and God were right. The land is indeed flowing with milk and honey. It's lush. There's grapes, there's figs, there's dates. It's a beautiful place. In fact, we even brought some grapes back with us, a huge bushel of grapes that it took 2 people to carry. It was so heavy. And by the way, the symbol of the 2 people carrying the grape branch between them became the symbol for the Ministry of Tourism in Israel, if you've seen that, the 2 people holding the grapes in between. So we see the land is beautiful land, beautiful, wonderful land, but there's giants there. They're huge, they're big, they're enormous. We look like grasshoppers in their eyes. That's literally what they said. We look like little bugs to them. They're going to squash us like bugs. That's how bad it is. Let's go back to Egypt. That's what they say. And then Caleb, by the way, it's only Caleb who speaks up. I know we all taught Joshua, but take a look at the text. It doesn't say anything about Joshua right there. How Joshua got into this picture is a long story I'm not going to explain this morning. If you want to know, talk to me at lunch. In any case, Caleb says, come on, guys. Remember 10 plagues in Egypt, parting of the Red Sea, the whole Egyptian army drowning? We defeated the Amalekites with God's help. What are you talking about? God's with us. We're going to be fine. Let's go for it. Doesn't work. Everybody's demoralized. So God says, I'm done with these people. That's it. I've had it. They complain everywhere I look. They're going to die right here in the wilderness. They said they wanted to die in the wilderness. That's what they're going to do. They're going to die in the wilderness. And Moses turns to God and he says, God, wait a second. Remember after the sin of the golden calf, by the way, this was in the text. We didn't read it this morning, but you can go back and look at it. Moses actually reminds God of what God said after the golden calf. So just in case you forgot, God said to Moses, I'm going to forgive these people. And Moses says, prove it. I want you to see your face. And God says, you can't see my face and live. Nobody sees my face. But I'm going to show you my 13 attributes of kindness and mercy. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'chanun, Erech Apayim V'rav Chesed Ve'emet. I am so compassionate and loving kindness, full of kindness and mercy. I will pardon this people. This is called the 13 attributes of God's mercy. So Moses reminds God of this now. He says, you want to destroy these people? But you told me back there after the golden calf, you're going to forgive them. So God says, okay, all right. I'm not going to kill them right away. But they said they wanted to die in the wilderness. They're going to die in the wilderness. Everybody over the age of 20 is going to wander around for 40 years. They're all going to die. Everybody under the age of 20, I guess that was like the voting age, or actually was the age of going into the military, so they didn't have a choice. Everybody under the age of 20, they're going to live. They will go and conquer the land. And right after he does that, then God gives this commandment. When you enter the land and you want to make bread, you're going to plant the wheat, you're going to harvest the wheat, you're going to grind the grain, you're going to knead the dough. And before you put the dough in the oven, I want you to take a little pinch challah off. By the way, we still do that today if you're making challah. That's why we call it challah, because you're supposed to take a little pinch of the dough off. and then bake the rest. And the dough that you pinch off is dedicated to God and has to be burned up and discarded because it's not for eating. So I want you to do this. But notice what God said. When you enter the land and you want to have bread, this is what you're going to do. So my teacher, Reuven Hammer, says, what is God like rubbing salt in the wound? He just told them they're not going to enter the land. Why does he now say, when you enter the land, you're going to make challah? You're not going to enter the land. You're going to die in the wilderness. What, is God toying with them? Or maybe God is giving them hope and saying, yeah, you won't enter the land, but your children will. And when they want to make dough, this is how they're going to do it. And then Reuven Hammer notes there's another commandment, almost right after that, the one which I just talked about briefly, about making tzitzit on the corners of your garments. And these tzitzit are supposed to remind you of God's commandments and God's ways, and to remind you to follow God's path. And an interesting verb is used there. It says you're not supposed to stray off and wander after what your eyes see. And the verb for straying after what your eyes see is lo taturu acharei einechem. You should not wander off after your eyes. But you know, our ancestors and modern Bible scholars all say that words in the Bible are not used by accident. And the verb taturu, to wander off, is the same verb that's used over and over and over again in the story of the spies. When they wandered through the land to see what it looked like, they spied out the land. The verb taturu was the verb that was used there. So what is God saying to these people? I'm going to make you put fringes on the corners of your garments and remind you of that sin of the spies, that horrible thing they did that made you die in the wilderness. Now you're going to have to wear a constant reminder of this all the time? Or again, is he giving you hope and saying, yeah, you know what? From now on, you're going to look at these and you're going to follow what I tell you to do, and things will be all right for you. It will go well with you because you'll be following the path that I have laid out for you. And so then Reuven Hammer points out that this generation is called by Nahum Bialik, a great Israeli poet. It's called the generation, the last generation of slavery and the first generation of freedom. They're in that liminal moment, that passing through the doorway from slavery to freedom. And that idea that they're half slaves, half free, is exactly what creates this ambiguity of what God is trying to do for them. Are they reminded of their past, or are they looking towards the future with the making the challah and the wearing the fringes? And he says, now in our generation, we too are kind of this liminal generation. Immediately before us was the Holocaust, and now we have a state of Israel. We're in that transitional period, and we need these reminders of making challah so that every time we eat bread, we're reminded that it's a holy act. It's not just an animal act of eating, but we separate a little dough for God to remind us that even in the act of eating, God is present with us in our lives. And we wear these fringes every day to remind us of God's commandments so that we will follow on God's path and look toward the future, to a better world, to the better future that we're going to create for ourselves. We too are this generation that's in between, and we need these reminders of God's presence in our lives. Shabbat Shalom.